Hello, my name is Stephen Balto, and the topic I am refuting today is cigarette smoking. The main claim I am refuting is cigarette smoking has a significant impact on pollution, which was supported by air pollution, ground and water pollution, and environment. That leads me to my response to the first secondary claim about air pollution. The air pollution claim is undermined with evidence challenges, which lead an argument from analogy fallacy. The comparison between the 2-liter diesel engine and the 3 cigarettes undermines the claim because it lacks detail. The number of cylinders in the motor, or what kind of cigarettes were used, or the fact that the diesel exhaust consists primarily of carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, and sulfur oxide, and cigarette smoke consists primarily of nicotine, tar, and carbon monoxide, which only gives the particulate matter between the two one common chemical. This lack of detail creates the fallacy of argument from analogy, which is when the dissimilarities between two cases are so great that they nullify the validity of the argument. And that is from the book. That leads me to the next claim. The secondary claim about ground and water pollution is undermined with a counterclaim. My counterclaim is plastic trash has a greater impact on ground and water pollution than the cigarette butts. My first piece of evidence is a survey taken by the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup crew, and it says that nearly half of the Canadians believe that plastic bags are the #1 pollutant on the shoreline, and only 18% of them believe that cigarette butts are the top culprit affecting the shoreline. My next piece of evidence is, although plastic bags don't biodegrade, they do photodegrade, and that's when they're exposed to ultraviolet light. The ultraviolet light breaks down the plastic into really small granules, and scientists don't know yet how long this takes, but they're guessing around 500 years to 1,000 years. And cigarette butts only take about 25 years to biodegrade, which means that the ground pollution of plastic trash is a lot higher because it's going to be around a lot longer. My last piece of evidence for this is plastic bags have a greater ability to suffocate sea creatures like mammals and fish, because whales that inhale water to filter out the plankton for food can sometimes inhale these plastic bags, which can get lodged in their throat and cause them to suffocate. Or sea turtles mistake them for jellyfish and eat them and can get stuck in their throat and they could die. This is a greater effect on water pollution because the toxic chemicals that are in cigarette butts are less effective in killing sea creatures as plastic bags are. That leads me to my last response, which is on the final secondary claim. The last secondary claim is undermined with reasoning challenges like irrelevant arguments and shifting of grounds. The first fallacy of reasoning is heard when the advocate said the soil being used to produce cigarettes could be used to produce food for third world countries. This is irrelevant to the argument because the argument is not about the relocation of resources, it's about pollution. The next part is when the advocate says both energy and water is being used to produce cigarettes and on top of that, the chemical waste from the manufacturing units are being dumped onto the soil. This is a shifting of grounds because the advocate is shifting from his claim about the significant impact of cigarette smoke on pollution to cigarette manufacturing effect on the environment. And that leads me to my conclusion, which is, due to the evidence challenges, reasoning challenges, and counterclaims I have presented, there's little left to back this argument up. And although this is true, I also found it hard to come up with actual refuting claim against his main claim. And that's it.
All right, I just want to start with the last thing that you said. You don't have to have a contradictory claim, remember. You're not obligated to present an opposing point of view, and so either an explanation or an apology is not really required there. What you ought to be doing is going back to the advocate's claim. So, based on what the advocate said, can we conclude that cigarettes are a significant source of pollution? I've shown you how they're not a significant source of air pollution based on the example that the advocate himself presented. I've shown you that when it comes to litter, it's much less significant than a lot of other things, and point out what did the advocate's evidence actually say about the pollution there. All it did was count the number of cigarette butts or something like that. It didn't tell us what the impact on the environment was or what any of the harms were. Do the contrasting that way instead of, I think you end your argument a little less forcefully than it might have been argued otherwise. That was the other thing that I thought was a little bit problematic about the argument, and that is that you do a good job presenting the claims that you've got, and I think you do a nice job explaining the reasoning challenges that you have. But what you're not doing very well is kind of summarizing the adequacy of the argument that the advocate presented in the first place. In other words, you're so focused on getting those reasoning challenges in that you're not making the summary arguments as you go along. Why is this argument that I just made so important? Because the only evidence they have to prove that there's any air pollution is this one comparison using a diesel truck. And the problem with that is that they only have one particulate in common, and we have no information about how significant this is. So the evidence that they present is not adequate because of the analogy problem that I'm pointing out. But the bigger argument is, what's the impact on pollution? And you need to be plugging that in as well. So I like the things that you did, but it just felt like you were, picking out individual things instead of looking at the bigger picture of those points as you were going through them. All right, thank you.